first thing I heard was the sound of trucks. Well, in my neighborhood, trucks are not allowed to drive. The nearest street that you can drive trucks on is 5 blocks away. And ordinarily you can't hear them, but I was hearing them. They were driving up the street, and I thought, the hearing is amazing. And I listened some more, and I could hear the little insects moving around in the walls of the house, and I thought, I got to get exterminated. And then I tried my eyesight out, and it was amazing. I looked around the room, and everything was sharp and clear. The colors were a little different. They were more pastel looking than what I would normally consider to be the normal palette colors. And I looked at the window, and I could see these screen wires, the wires in the aluminum screen there. And I looked closely at them, and I saw that I could see the flakes of corrosion on the wires. They're aluminum wires. And I thought, that's like microscopic vision. And then I looked through the window at the neighbor's yard. I'm looking across the street at his lawn, and I'm looking between the braids of grass, and I can see individual grains of dirt in his lawn across the street in the dark at midnight. And I probably could have seen further than that if my view hadn't been blocked. I couldn't see through solid things. I could see through glass. And then my sense of smell was incredible. I smelled smells I'd never smelled before, and I knew what they were. I smelled the paper in the books on the shelf. I smelled the wallpaper. I smelled the furniture polish. I smelled the paint on things, and I knew what they were. And I was like, I'd never smelled them before, but I knew exactly what I was smelling. And I thought, oh. And I was enjoying this for a moment, and then I looked down on the floor. Oh. I saw my body on the floor, and I said, I'm not healed. I'm dead. I said, no, this is not good. So I thought, well, I need to get some help. So I thought, I'll go to the nearest room and see if I can wake up one of my family members. And my daughter's room was the closest one. And so I walked down the hallway to her room, and I grabbed at the doorknob, and my hand went right through the doorknob. And I thought, she's a problem. But I'm a problem solver, so I know what the solution is. I just walked through the door, and I did. And it was an interesting sensation when I walked through a door for the first time. As I passed through the door, I could feel the door around me, and it felt like this cool stream of something weighty was falling over me, like cool sand, or even heavier than that, like lead, like a metal or something. And as I walked through it, my vision disappeared while I was inside it. I went black. And then when I got on the other side, I was in my daughter's room, and I looked around. Lights are off, but everything is perfectly visible. And so I walked to my daughter's bed. Alexandra was about, this is 1995, so she was about 4 years old. She was asleep in her bed, and I went over and put my hand on her shoulder to wake her up, and my hand went right to her shoulder, and she did not even respond. And I said, Alex, wake up. I've got an emergency. She didn't hear me. No response. She couldn't wake her up, couldn't get her to feel anything, couldn't get her to hear anything. And then I thought, well, I can't wake up Alex. Maybe I can wake up my son. And so I realized I was running out short of time. I knew that the human brain dies after about 5 or 6 minutes without oxygen, so I just really had to act quickly. So instead of going out to the hallway again and going down the hall to his bedroom door, where the closets in their respective rooms back up to each other, and so I just walked into her closet, walked straight through the wall, the clothes and wall, and came out in my son's room. And he was asleep in the bed. I tried the same routine with him that I tried with Alex. No response. And I said, I'm running out of time. I can't get help. I'm going to have to solve this myself. And so I went through his door and down the hallway back to the living room, and I knelt down by my body. And as I was kneeling by the body, I had this sensation of something really evil was approaching me. And if you watch a horror movie and you're expecting something really bad to happen, and the music changes and it gives you the goosebumps. Well, if I'd had skin, I would have had goosebumps. If I'd had hair, they'd been standing out. But, I didn't have a body at that point. But I knew something really bad was about to happen. And then right through the windows in my living room come two creatures that I'd never seen before. They were human-sized, about 6 foot. They had normal human proportions, except they were very muscular, but also very emaciated, like someone who had worked very hard and never been really properly fed. And they were not wearing any clothes, but they were covered with a black short fur. And they had hands and feet, but instead of fingernails, they had talons. And then their ears were pointed. And then the really interesting feature about how they looked was that their eyes were solid yellow and seemed to glow. And when they opened their mouths, I could see white fangs. They had like vampire-like fangs and a bright red tongue. And I just remember that as being very stark contrast to their otherwise color. And in their hands, they were the two of them were each carrying a set of manacles, one for hands, one for feet. And they were coming at me, and they were laughing. And I was like, who are you? Or what are you doing here? And they said, we're come to take you to hell. And I was like, I'm a Christian. I'm saved. You can't be taking me to hell. I'm going to heaven if I'm not going to come back alive again. And they laughed at that. They thought that was hilarious. And immediately they just blasted at me this list of all the sins I had never dealt with. And I was like, well, I said my sinner's prayer and I, confessed to other sins and stuff, but there were things in there I never even thought were sins. For example, just to get, curt with a cashier at the store because things were taking too long, or she made a miscalculation. That's enough to send you to hell. I was surprised at that. And then, if you broke a promise, that was bad. If you owed anybody money and you didn't pay it, that was wrong. So this is wrong. And there were so many of them. I was like, okay, and you got me, but I'm going to fight this because then they showed me hell and what they were going to do to me in hell. And I don't have words to describe it. You ever read Mary Baxter's A Divine Vision of Hell? That's tame. What is tame compared to what I saw? It was just, hell is so terrible that no matter what happened to me, I could not hate someone enough to wish them to go to hell. And I thought, okay, I am not doing this. I've got to find a way out of this. And in that state, I could remember every detail of my life with total recall, and I could process that information extremely fast. And so in just less time than it takes to tell about it, in less than a second, I reviewed my entire life looking for any clue what to do in this situation. So Vlad, what would you have done?
I would try to figure out a way how to get back into the body.
Yeah, that was one of my plans, but I didn't have time for that. So I remembered back in the early 80s, I was going to a house church called the Plainsboro Gospel Fellowship. And there was this really remarkable fellow. His name was David Gerlin. I call him Dave. Dave was a real Jesus person. He was always talking about the Holy Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit and angels and demons. And he would give me books by John G. Lake and other authors. And, to be polite, I listened to him and I read his books, but I didn't really know what to do with them because I didn't have any context to use them. And I never met a demon or an angel. So what do I do with that? Well, he had said something to me that it was a real life saver for me. He said, Carl, if you ever meet a demon, rebuke it in the name of Jesus Christ. Well, they were almost in my face at that point. They almost had those chains on me. And if they had done that, I think I would have been lost for eternity. And I said, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ. And it was like a wrecking ball hit him. They were not clear out of the room. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to hell, at least not right away. So, but the judgment day is still coming and I'm not saved. I've got to get back in my body because there's some serious issues to deal with here. And so I knelt back down by my body and I was feeling around trying to figure out how to reanimate this thing, how to get back into that body and how to, live again. And I figured I got about 2 or 3 minutes here to figure this out. So I better do it quickly. And while I was doing that, I got another sensation, and it was a very good one. I felt that something very, very good was coming and approaching me, and there was love, and there was things I can't describe with English words, but it was good. It was just really perfect, beautiful. And then right through my front door, he didn't use the window like the devils did. Right through my front door comes Jesus Christ. And the first thing he said to me was, Carl, this is not my true appearance. I'm appearing this way so you'll recognize me. To this day, I don't know why he had to do that. Because in the spirit, when you meet an entity, a person, you know exactly who you're dealing with. You know, there's no question who you're dealing with. I knew I was dealing with the Lord, Jesus, because he just emanated such godlike qualities. There was absolute assurance about him. There was a sense of authority, a sense of power. And it was really powerful. I knew he could have annihilated me with just a thought. So it was kind of terrifying too. But then he put me at ease. He told me he knew all the sins that the demons had listed, and he knew all about me, and he just loved me unconditionally. And that was exactly what I needed to hear right then and there, because I knew I was lost, but he loved me even in my lost state. I thought that was very profound. And then he went on to say that he was disappointed in me because I had not lived the life that the Father had intended for me. And I was kind of surprised at that because I had lived, according to what I'd been taught by the church leadership, almost a letter-perfect Christian life. And you know what? He said, you rank. And I said, he told me, you can go to heaven now because you invoked me. And my word says, if anyone calls upon the name of the Lord, they will be saved. But you will go to heaven as the lowest of all saints. You will have no rank and no reward. It took me, he didn't explain why exactly then, but I figured it out later that the problem was that my motives were wrong. I had not done the things because I loved God or because I loved others or even that I loved myself, because I didn't at that time. And so with the wrong motives, it means nothing. And so all of that was effort and money I donated, the time I donated, all the things I did. I spent a lot of time doing evangelism and so forth. It didn't mean anything to him because it wasn't done for the right motive. I was just trying to get out of hell and maybe get a heavenly reward. So this is what I would call pragma. In Greek, the word pragma is where we get pragmatism from. And what he was looking for was love, agape, and he would settle for Philos. You know what story with Peter. But this wasn't either agape or Philos. This was just pragma. And that's not a currency in heaven. Well, so I could go to heaven at that point. But he said, if you go to heaven now, if you die now, your children are not going to make it. They're going to go to hell because they're not going to get raised right. So he gave me the option of coming back to this life. But he warned me, if I came back to this life and I did not get it right with God, I could still go to hell. And I was just actually terrified about going to hell. That was not something I wanted to do, but I loved my children. I really did. And the thought of them going to hell was unacceptable too. And I also knew that that's what he wanted. So I agreed to come back. And so that's when we said, we need to heal your body. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And the next thing I know, I'm no longer in my living room. I'm standing on the bank of a very broad, flat, wide, muddy river. And first thing I noticed is on the banks of the river are papyrus reeds growing. And I thought, oh, this is Africa. And then I look around some more and I see there's some people. There was a woman working in a field, and she was short with very dark skin and straight black hair. And she was wearing a white robe, but very much like the ancient Egyptian art show. And there was another man, also very similar, short, dark, straight black hair. And he was on a little reed boat, fishing in the river. And I thought, oh, I'm in ancient Egypt? And Jesus didn't explain anything about that, but he pointed to a pile of papyrus reeds that had already been cut, and there was some rope and some tools and a long pole nearby. And he said he wanted me to build a reed boat. And this image in my mind appeared of a reed boat. And I thought, okay, I'll try this. And I set to work, and in very short order, I had built a very nice reed boat like the ancient Egyptians used. I to this day don't know why all this was necessary, but that's what we were doing. And he got in the boat, and he said, push it into the river. And so I pushed it in the river, and I got in and took the pole and pulled us out into the river. And he said, go down to that island there. And just a short ways down the river, there was this long, low, flat island. Didn't have much on it, had some rocks and some small plants, bushes and grasses and things. And the remarkable thing about this island was superimposed upon it was an image of my body lying prone. The head was upstream, the feet were downstream. And he said, as we go by the island, I want you to reach out and heal your body. I didn't quite figure out how I was going to do that because this thing was huge. It was like about 15, 20 feet high and hundreds of feet long. And my arms are not going to reach that far from the boat out in the river. And as I was trying to understand this intellectually, the current was taking us down past the body, and we were already past the head. And I looked at the head, and I saw that the eyes were like charcoal-colored balls in a transparent head. It was like the invisible man body, where you can see through the skin and into the organs of the body. And all the healthy organs were all clear, but the damaged ones were colored. The eyes were kind of a sooty gray, and then the throat was a bright red. The lungs were mottled green, and the hand was charred, was red, black, and white. The more severe charred was the black stuff. And we passed ahead, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And he didn't say anything more, but I realized I was not doing what I should do. And all he told me was reach out and touch the organs and heal them. I didn't see how it would work, but I reached out, and for somehow my hand went and touched the throat. And as soon as it touched that throat, it turned clear. Well, we continued down the current. It touched the lungs, and they turned clear. And I touched the hand, and it turned clear. I thought, well, this works. This is good. But I'm going to have to go back up and finish the job at the head. So when we got down to the foot of the island, literally the feet, I started turning the boat around, pulling it back upstream. And as soon as we got turned upstream, the vision was interrupted, and I found myself back in the living room. And there was the demons coming through the wall again, and they're coming at me with the chains. And this time they weren't laughing, they weren't talking to me, they were just rushing at me as fast and hard as they could. And at first I was like, this isn't going to happen because Jesus is standing right here on my left. He's going to take care of you guys in short order. And Jesus didn't make a move, and he didn't say a word. And I was like, Lord, is that something I need to know? And those things were almost on me, and I didn't know what to do, but Jesus was not going to do anything. And so I couldn't think of anything else to do. I just rebuked those demons again. They were, again, almost like right on me. I rebuked you in the name of Jesus Christ. And poof, they were gone, and they didn't come back. And, Jesus never explained any of that to me at that point, and I was really shocked. They could have taken me to hell with Jesus standing right there at my side. And it took me decades before I finally understood what was going on there. The answer's in the Great Commission. You know why he wouldn't do anything?
Because it's our job.
You got that right away. I'm jealous. That took me over 20 years to figure that out. And the Great Commission, he told us, heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out demons, cleanse lepers, preach the gospel. Those are things he delegated to us. That was my job to cast those demons out. And he expected me to know that, to know who I was, who he was, and what our respective roles are. If I hadn't known that, I could be in hell right now. Not a good thing. Anyway, as soon as the demons were gone, the vision returned, and I pulled the canoe or the papyrus boat back up to the head, reached out, touched the eyes, they turned clear, and then instantly the vision was over. I was back in the living room, and Jesus said, "It's time to put you back in your body." And right then, I remembered my list of questions. Oh, I wanted to answer Esther's list of questions so badly. But unlike the book with Dr. Eby, Jesus didn't offer to answer those questions. And I was just like, I really want to get answers to these questions. It's very important to me. But on the other hand, Jesus had just saved me from hell, eternity in hell. He just showed me how to heal my body. And he was just about to resurrect me. And I did not want to do or say anything that would jeopardize that. Because like I said, he's God. And you just do not do anything to offend him. You can't, the consequences are unspeakable. And I just resigned myself, okay, I'm going to go back and forget about the questions, and I'll do my best, once I get back to figure this out myself. But, I forgot something very important. What's that?
What did you forget?
Well, he knows our every thought. Jesus knew what I was thinking. I wasn't saying anything, but he knew exactly what I was thinking. And what he said to me? He said, "Carl, would you like the answers to my list of questions?"
He flipped it on you.
Oh, wow. I didn't know what to do with that. Momentarily, I thought about, I have no idea what his list of questions is. Certainly going to be different from my list of questions. And I finally concluded whatever his list is, it's going to be better than mine. So yes, I want the answers to your list of questions. And then Jesus says to me, "Carl, your mind is too small to understand my list of questions, because my list of questions is all questions. Are you willing to become one with me and share my mind?" Well, at that point, I had done a lot of research into near-death experiences. And in none of those stories did anyone ever become one with God and share his mind. I had no precedent for that. There was nothing in the scriptures, anything like that. And I had done, a comparative study of religions, and there are some religions out there that teach if you become one with God, you cease to exist because you are absorbed into him, and your personality is just lost in his infiniteness. And it's like, he's got a really powerful person I'm dealing with here. I would just be overwhelmed and just disappear in there, and I might cease to be me. And I like me. I wasn't interested in, just being absorbed and disappearing into God. But then, I realized he loved me. He had a plan for me. He wasn't going to do anything bad. So this has got to be a good thing. But I had no idea what I was getting into. And I said, yes. And the moment I agreed to that, I just felt myself sucked into Jesus Christ himself. And we were one. And I knew what he knew, and he knew what I knew. But my personality was still intact with all my memories. And what was remarkable about that is I thought, this is really normal and natural. I feel like I've been here before and done this before, but I don't remember this at all. And it was so perfect, so right. And I also detected that not only was I in Jesus, but I was in the Father too. And so I knew what the Father was doing and thinking. And what was remarkable is that even though they're one, they have distinct personalities. They're very different in their personalities, but they are identical in their character. And that was a profound revelation for me, because how can someone be one with another entity and still retain their individuality? But that's the way it works. And I got a glimpse of everything that God was doing. It was amazing. The things that were going on in heaven. And I got to see the whole universe at a glance. And I realized there are many worlds out there, and there are worlds out there that have people on them, human beings like us. But they're perfect worlds because Satan is not there. And I got to see the celestial city, and it was vast, enormous, like almost infinite. And yet I could comprehend that at a glance without any difficulty. And the activities going on there are amazing. The things that are, God is very dynamic. We think of God as being some static divine being that sits on a throne and surrounded by angels and kind of just sits there like he's been in the portrait. But no, he is involved in so many different things, and they're so powerful, so energetic, so dynamic, so diverse. There's no end to them. And that was just a glimpse I got. And then this wall like came around the mind that I shared with God and Christ, and it narrowed everything down to one subject, and that was human history. So Jesus explained to me that we were going to take a look at human history from his perspective. He showed me human history in two different ways. The first way was we looked at an individual, and we would start out looking at their life and see how the decisions they make affected the course of their life. And I'm an engineer, so I understand something about statistics and probability. And what was interesting to me is that in calculus, we say a equation is bounded when it has limits to it. If you do an integral, it'll have a lower and upper limit, and you'll do the calculation between the limits. And all of our choices are all carefully scripted by God to be within certain boundaries. We cannot go this far evil, and we cannot go this far good. We can only be this poor or this rich. But there is an infinite number of choices in between. So when a person makes a choice, they will go one way or the other, and they can go back and forth, and they got free will, but there is one path that God has chosen for them, whether it's up to them if they take that or not. And so we looked at that, and it's an infinite number of permutations. So we got an infinite number of choices, an infinite number of permutations for one life. And then we looked at how two lives interacted. And we saw that the choices of one affect the other. And so our choices not only affect our life, but they can also affect others. But God will now allow one person's choices to basically force another person into either heaven or hell. They still always have that free will, that choice there. But our choices do affect others, and quite profoundly. And so you had an infinite number of permutations in one life, an infinite number of permutations in another life. You multiply that, that's an infinity times an infinity. And we looked at that just like that. God's mind can comprehend an infinite number of permutations effortlessly, like we look at ordinal numbers, 1, 2, 3. And so then we looked at how a family would interact, and then how a community would interact, and then how a region would interact, and then a state, and then a country, and then a whole empire. And we looked at the whole of human history from the creation of earth and Adam and Eve to the end of time. And the whole exercise was subjectively about 5 minutes for me. And what I saw in there was very profound, in that there is order and patterns that we can't see from our perspective down here. But everything from God's perspective follows a predetermined plan. It's got purpose. It's got meaning. It's got rich in symbolism. And there's just amazing opportunities in this life that we just have no idea what we're missing. And at the end of that, I was like, I had just taken the ultimate roller coaster ride. I was just thrilled. I was amazed. And there was like a pause in what we were communication, like Jesus was waiting for me to have some kind of reaction. But whatever it was, he didn't get it from me. And he seemed to almost sigh. And he said, Carl, let's try this from another perspective. And so we went through the whole exercise. And this time we started with a different person, different, kind of emphasis on history. And there was all this other things, and I saw amazing things. The whole of human history. I knew the details of every life, not only that had been lived and would be lived, but could have been lived, because there are a lot of people who could have and should have been born or were killed early in their lives and didn't get to realize it. But I saw the whole thing, every possible thing, and it was beautiful. I thought, wow, God has done incredible work just planning out our lives beforehand. It talks, Sid Roth talks, Kevin Zadar especially talks about the books that are written about us in heaven. They're real, and they are so amazingly detailed, and they're really infinite in the content too. It's not, just a book you take off the shelf. So we did that the second time, and again there was this pause, and it was like Jesus was waiting for something, and I was again excited and thrilled, and it's just amazed at this experience, and I was thinking, why me? How come I'm experiencing all this amazing stuff? And then Jesus said, Carl, I think we need to do this a third time. There was something new in his tone of voice. It was like, there's something you need to get, and you're not getting it. And I knew right away that I needed to pay attention very closely at this third one, because this was going to be the last opportunity. And if I didn't get it this time, I wasn't going to get it at all. And this was historic. I know enough about history to realize I need to do this right, and because I've got to bring something profound back, but I had no idea what it was. So this time when we went through the exercise, I paid very, very close attention. And that's where this second vision of how he showed me human history came in, because this is all happening simultaneously. Now, I can't do justice to this because at that point my mind was in infinite mode, and there's so many details I can't even recall now. But while this is going on, I'm also seeing at the same time human history shown in graphical form, where each person's life is represented by a thread. Excuse me, my lungs still have some damage on them from the accident. So the person's life starts as a thread, and during the course of their life, it has several different colors to it. And it starts out white, and if they're living a good, righteous life, it stays white. But if they start to sin, it darkens. So a relatively small sin, it turns like a beige color. A more serious sin, it'll turn tan, and then brown. And then finally, when someone is just all out evil, it's black. And when the person dies, it changes color on the entire length to one of two colors. If they go to heaven, it turns gold. If they go to hell, it turns red. And I watched these threads. They would come to bundles. The smallest bundle would be like a family or close friends. And then, again, the bundles would be in communities. And as I said before, larger or geographical locations and states and nations and empires. And what was remarkable about this is the bundles would come together in these nodes. And so the nodes are several years wide, sometimes decades. But when the bundles come together, I noticed something about human history, and that when the nodes are present, it's very malleable. That a few individuals who understand the principles of divine history can make incredible impact that can just change the course of history, like diverting a river and at these nodes. And I could see where I was in the timeline. This is 1995, and I saw that the next major node was in 1998. And later on, after 1998, I realized that was when a lot of these big tech giants got their beginnings. And so they have become somebody knew what they were doing back then, and they became extremely powerful influencers in our society because of that. It wasn't so good. The other thing I noticed was that at the end of time, the two bundles divided. The gold went up to heaven and the red went down to hell. And I noticed the one going up to heaven was much smaller in diameter than the one going to hell. And I've worked as a machinist. And as a machinist, I've learned to measure things very accurately visually. I can look at something and tell, at least at that point, it's been decades since then, so it's not quite as accurate as it was. But at that point, I could look at something and measure it visually to within 1 part in 1,000. And so I realized that 2.5%, plus or minus 0.1% of the general population went to heaven. And the other remainder, 97.5%, went to hell. And since then, I've run into other people with near-death experiences, like Howard Pittman, exactly the same numbers. Kevin Zadai did the same numbers. Jeremy Nelson did the same numbers. So I'm pretty confident about that number. And when I realized that, Jesus interrupted the exercise to say, and I am very disappointed in my church. I gave the church everything they needed to win the entire world to salvation in any generation since the apostles, and they have failed. See, the 2.5%, that is the remnant that God keeps for himself. So that's a given. Okay, so that means that the church is right now batting 0.
Wow.
Jesus was very, very angry about that, actually. So anyway, in the third exercise, I was paying very close attention to the colors of these threads. And when it was white, I noticed that when people made a decision, they used a certain criteria: selfless love. And when they sinned, they were being selfish or cowardly, or they were being lazy. Those are the 3 biggies that were leading people to make sinful decisions: selfishness, laziness, cowardice, and ignorance played a large factor in that too. And right then I realized that the central theme of this whole creation, the whole of human history, was to teach one central lesson, and that is selfless love. And I realized there's only one question that really matters, and that is, what does this have to do with selfless love? If you make a decision based on selfless love, you're making the right decision. If you make it on any other criteria, you're making a wrong decision. And I got that. Jesus did not even continue the exercise. He stopped it right there. He said, Carl, that's the point I wanted you to get. It's time for you to go back. And right then, we started to separate. And as we separated, I could feel my mind shrinking back to its normal parameters, which is not ideal for me, because I could feel this massive amount of information just flowing out of me like a torrent. And I was thinking, this is good stuff. I want to keep this information. I need to take this back with me. And I was literally reaching up, trying to push this stuff back into me. And Jesus was like, well, you don't need that. You got what you needed. Time to go back. And in short order, I was back in my living room. Jesus was standing me by the body. And he didn't say anything more to me, but I was like, well, wait a minute. How do I raise my children right? And how do I get it right with you? And I had some other questions, and I would just suck right back into my body. And next thing I know, I'm in my body.
Thank you so much for watching this clip. If you want to see the full interview, just click on the video on your screen right now, and I'll see you there.